This morning, of course, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to explore how we can learn from the beehive and how that can support and inspire our thinking and how we think about supporting the growth and development of small and medium enterprises in the South African context. Beehives and bees, honeybees in general, have been incredible insofar as they've established strong communication systems. They've been incredible in how they've established infrastructure and how they do their nesting. They've been incredible in how they've worked harmoniously with their environment. And so we talk sustainability, ESG, and all of these things. And bees have been doing it. They work incredibly in how they do labor sharing, division of labor, and ultimately as well, simply thinking about all of these characteristics as opportunities of learning for ourselves in how we really think about beehive insofar as it organizes itself to inspire how we think about our economy. And so there are going to be two bodies of literature that we are going to double click on, that we hope certainly can help us make sense around why beehives are an area of learning and why we should not kill our teachers. I say we kill our teachers because the only time a bee dies is when it stings a mammal. It's because the sting itself gets stuck in the skin, and there's a proverbial bleeding of the bee post that. Outside of that, a bee never dies after it stings. And so humans are killers, and we kill our teachers. And so the two bodies of literature that I'm going to use to inspire our thinking about how we learn from beehives is one, what we call nudge theory, and I will get into the details of it, and also what we call chaos theory, which is often spoken also as the butterfly effect. And so certainly, when we start to think about beehive, the first thing that they do, of course, is they cluster. And so, as part of how they cluster, when we then come back into the theories that support how they organize themselves from a clustering point of view, is what we talk about as agglomeration. And certainly when you think about our small and medium enterprises in South Africa, they're two spars in the way they're organized, and therefore they're not able to leverage the cluster effect. And so when you look at the beehive, you'll see how the cluster itself sits right next to where the eggs have been nested, so that the process of production is right next to the feeding spot. And so when we think about cluster theory in South Africa, there's literature that supports the fact that when we do cluster our businesses, our small and medium enterprises, we've got better knowledge sharing, better technology transfer, and actually we've got higher survival rates for our small and medium enterprises. And this is why special economic zones and industrial clusters matter, and that's why they offer value. And so when we look at the beehive and how they think and organize themselves from a cluster theory point of view, it gives us an opportunity to start to think about how do we organize ourselves to ensure that we put our feeding basket right next to our production centers for our small and medium enterprises. And so this was really, I think, articulated in the 60s through what was then at the time called Marshallian industrial district theory, which has then developed over time. But certainly, as I said, humans are killers, and we kill our teachers, because this is where we get to learn around how we ought to organize ourselves from a small and medium enterprise context to be able to ensure that we can grow at scale. Just to give you some stats, 38% of the entrepreneurs, and this is coming from the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report, 38% of the entrepreneurs in South Africa are aged between 18 and 34. So close to 40% more entrepreneurs in the country are youth. Sadly, however, 53% of South Africans have got no entrepreneurial aspirations, primarily due to the fear of failure. When you look at a continental context, you've got 40% of Africans ex-South Africa with entrepreneurial intentions. That number in South Africa is 20%. There is often a number also we study which is called the business re-entry rate. Simply talks about the number of times businesses are able to come back after failing to be able to get onto a growth journey that leads them to grow into being medium and large enterprises. The global average for the business re-entry rate is 3.6 times. And so 3.6 times is the number of opportunities businesses have to come back into the market after they fail to be able to get onto a sustainable growth journey. In South Africa, that number is 1.1 times. And so when you hear that 53% of South Africans have no aspirations to start a business because of fear of failure, you start to understand that on average, in South Africa, you start a business, you fail once, you can't come back again. We don't have a culture that celebrates the re-entry of failed business. And this is exactly why we find ourselves with 20% of South Africans, only 20% compared to our African counterparts, of 40% having interest in getting into entrepreneurship. And so when we think about the Beehive and the inspiration that we must learn from them, as I said, is that they've got incredible systems of communication, labor sharing, labor division, infrastructure, nesting, and all harmoniously organized. And so you certainly start to think about how we think about some of these theories, and I said nudge. Nudge theory comes from a body of literature around behavioral economics. And we saw in the UK when David Cameron became Prime Minister, opened an entire office of behavioral economists who were going to study how to nudge the economy into progress. Bring it back to South Africa. It was 2000 when we had the Arrive Alive campaign. And only 15 years later, we started really enterprising around the fact that, did you bring your car? If you brought your car, you must Uber home. We needed the infrastructure first to be able to support, of course, a non-drinking and driving policy in a cultural context. But we are not self-organizing around something we've been nudging over and over again. Arrive alive, arrive alive. Now we are telling ourselves, we are talking to each other about arriving alive. That is nudge theory. Interestingly enough, when you get into chaos theory, I think the word explains itself. It seems particularly chaotic, right? And this is what we often talk about in the butterfly effect, which is quite important insofar as we've got to understand and study the system to know which lever we can pull that will give us a reverberating effect from an outcomes point of view. And so when we think about our economy, when we look at a beehive, when they are swarming, it looks chaotic around the tree when those bees are swarming around that. But there's an incredible amount of studying that is happening around the infrastructure, this tree. It's studying to know, will it be able to give us the right thermal context? Many people don't even understand that bees look for a particular way of swarming so that they can preserve the heat that will give them the best honey. And so when you see the chaos, it often seems like unrelated events that are taking place, but ultimately that will give you an answer in terms of when you've studied the part of the system where you can shift the lever, that will give you that kind of effect. And so when you bring it into South African context, you've got a limited budget. And so when you say, how do I best appropriate this budget in a way in which will give me the best outcomes and the reverberated outcomes, these are some of the things that certainly I think we can learn in how we think about beehives. I'll give you also a particular context specifically on two things in terms of small and medium enterprise in South Africa and how they run parallel with established business. In South Africa, 60% of the businesses that are run by females are in the care business. And we saw a couple of years ago when some pharma retailer had an advert that was a bit racist. And then in their remedial choices, they said, we're going to support young women who are in the hair care business. In South Africa, if you look at the young businesses that are run by men, most of them are in either taxi business or in the automotive repair context. When you look at South Africa, we are a massive exporter from an automotive point of view, as well as a housed economy in terms of having OEMs. And so when we think about all of our informal sectors, they actually run incredibly parallel to some of the formal sectors that are incredibly successful in South Africa. And so when we bring that in, it's around really ensuring that we are able to bring the informal sector in and the formal sector in a way in which it gives us an opportunity to move one dial in a way in which we can have a reverberating effect. And so simply, when we think about then these bees and a lot of what they have taught us, is that one, it's about making optimal use of the resources in your local environment. And so for us, it talks about localization. We are seeing it coming through on the back of COVID specifically, where we are seeing kind of a global relocalization energy coming back. But certainly I think it's some of the things that we can learn from the hive. Two, indigenous bees produce better honey. And so we've got to think about how do we harness the things that we've got. What are the indigenous components of what we've got that are going to be productive for what we can harness? There is a plant called Umkaloabo, which was first, I guess, popularized in 1912. First by a British guy, interestingly enough, who went back to Britain and said that his tuberculosis had been cured. And at the time, the cure for tuberculosis had not been formalized. And he went through 40 years of litigation because the British did not believe that an indigenous South African plant could cure tuberculosis. He eventually got out of it in the 50s. And simply now we export Umkaloabo to Germany alone, 120 million euros per annum. These are the indigenous contexts in which we can start to think about our economy in the way in which small and medium enterprises are the ones who are harvesting these plants and taking them into global economies. And of course, we've got to think about sustainability. And when you think about the relationship between the bee and the plant, it is harmonious. It is about shared value. And so when we think about all of the things that are emerging in our economy, we're talking ESG, sustainability, it is really about shared value. And when we look at the beehive, they don't break the systems from which they really benefit. And we've got to start to think about that as well in how we learn from the beehive. And ultimately, I think it is partnership and collaboration. And we haven't harnessed and energized the culture of partnering. And when you look at how the beehive works, from the worker bees, from the drones, from the queen bee, it is about partnership to ensure that we've got a productive ecosystem in so far as the hive is concerned. And so when we think about our economy and we think about the economy in the hive, we say, of course, humans are killers, and we kill our teachers. May we find the opportunity to learn from our teachers and make sure that we really create a conducive environment for the growth and development of small and medium enterprises.